3 terrifying New Year's Eve horror stories that will haunt your midnight countdown. I never should have opened that door. The moment my fingers brushed against the cold handle, a shiver raced down my spine. It was just a typical New Year's Eve, the air electric with excitement, yet an unsettling dread filled the room. The clock ticked away, counting down more than just seconds. It counted down to the unknown that I in my small, dimly lit apartment. The faint scent of burnt popcorn lingered in the air, remnants of my half-hearted attempt at snacks. I flipped through the channels, searching for something, anything to distract me from the feeling creeping in like the shadows that danced on the walls. Outside, fireworks exploded, brilliant bursts of color, masking the dark that hid just beyond the door. But for me, all the color in the world couldn't drown out that foreboding presence. With each tick of the clock, the sounds amplified, soft whispers swirling around me, cold air brushing against my skin, as if someone else was inside with me. The shadows twisted, flickering in the corners of my vision. I felt eyes on me, though I was alone, or at least I thought I was. I could swear I heard a soft giggle, echoing in the dead silence that followed. That it wasn't long before things really started to shift. Objects on my cluttered table began to tremble, then shake. My heart raced, each beat screaming for me to flee. I moved closer to the door, drawn in by something invisible. Perhaps it was curiosity, maybe it was foolish bravery. Each step forward felt heavier, weighed down by an ominous pull I could not resist. Suddenly, a loud bang reverberated off the walls, sending adrenaline rushing through me. I recoiled, my breath caught in my throat, the shadows deepening, swirling. They whispered secrets I couldn't comprehend. I had to get out. I turned to run, my mind racing, but something stopped me. Something stood there, at the door, just beyond the threshold. I couldn't see it clearly. A silhouette, tall and ominous, loomed in the darkness as the clock tower chimed. 1, 2, 3. Before I could scream, the door slammed shut, echoing through the eerie quiet. My heart pounded louder than the countdown. What had I unleashed? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The reverberating chime of the clock faded, yet the oppressive silence was tangible, pressing against my chest as I stood paralyzed, the shadows only inches away. My heartbeat thumped a wild rhythm as my mind grasped at the edges of sanity. It was too much, the darkness, the whispers, the dread that slithered through the air like smoke. Who's there? I croaked, the question feeling like a pitiful plea rather than any semblance of bravery. The figure by the door remained motionless, its outline edged in a profound darkness that swallowed any light nearby. I squinted, hoping to decipher its features, but only saw an expanse of black stretching out and consuming everything else. An answering laugh rippled through the air, a sound both childlike and sinister. My instincts screamed at me to bolt, yet my feet felt rooted to the floor, the grip of fear freezing me in place. "Let me in," it purred, the words felt like ice against my skin. It was closer now, I could sense it. A chill swept through the room, swirling around me, as if the very atmosphere held its breath, awaiting my response. Still, I couldn't move. I was ensnared in this otherworldly prison, with the entity pushing at the edges of my reality. "Please, leave me alone," I finally managed to whisper, horrified at the desperation in my voice. The clock continued to tick away as the entity seemed to dissolve in a vortex of shadows, and for a brief moment, silence reigned. But then the whispers rose again, sharp, biting words that slithered into my ears. "You can't escape." That statement played like a haunting melody, filling me with dread anew. A cold sweat prickled at my back, crawling like ice across my skin. Something within me screamed for a way out, yet curiosity gnawed at my resolve. What was the entity offering? A riddle, a truth, a danger. Suddenly, the walls seemed to shudder as I watched an Huron elongated hand shot out from beyond the doorframe, its fingers uncomfortably elongated and claw-like. The hand twitched as if grasping for the warmth of the room, and the clock chimed again, calling my attention back. The countdown approached its final minutes. The door rattled violently, the whispering crescendoing, "Let me in." I finally found the strength to move, spinning around to grab my phone, desperate for a lifeline, a flicker of reality amidst the torment. I glanced back, but the shadows had receded. The only telltale sign of their presence was that icy grip on my heart. I dialed the only number I could think of, me best friend, hoping she could pull me back from the edge of this nightmare. The phone rang, echoing like a lifeline thrown into a black abyss. "Come on, Sarah, pick up," I muttered, my voice trembling. But just as I was about to hang up, I heard her voice, muffled but distorted, as if I were speaking underwater. "Hello? Is it you? Can you hear me? Sarah. There's something in my apartment. I can't explain, but I need help." I cried. The urgency in my voice grew, desperation clawing at me as the shadows surged again. I let out a frantic breath, ready to explain, but then her words shifted, they became dripping with malice, tainted by the very thing I feared the most. "Help?" she echoed back, with a giggle that slithered into my bones. "But you opened the door, remember? You wanted this." Chills cascaded through me. My friend's voice was far too familiar, yet buried underneath was something sinister, like the presence whispering in my ear. What are you talking about?" I stammered, dread pulsing. "Stop fighting it, Sarah. The countdown is almost over." It was as if the world fell silent once more. My heart halted as I turned, the shadow's presence solidifying behind me. The clock struck midnight, the sound echoing with a thunderous roar that resonated through the apartments. And then, with a force that shattered the silence, the door burst open, expelling a blinding darkness that swept over me, pulling me into its cold embrace. I staggered backward, the phone slipping from my hand, clattering to the floor as laughter erupted from the dark, filling the room with a cacophony of mocking joy, a cruel celebration of my impending doom. And just as I thought it was over, a pair of glinting eyes emerged from the depths of that shadow, fixating on me with a predatory gaze. A voice, breathy and tantalizing, whispered, "Welcome to your nightmare." Then, everything faded to black. The darkness clung to me like a shroud, cold and unyielding as I floated in its depthless void. I tried to scream, but the air thickened around me, sucking the sound from my lips like a great beast swallowing its prey. Panic clawed at my chest, forcing me to open my eyes, yet there was nothing to see. The silence pressed down, wrapping me in its suffocating embrace. In that unsettling stillness, the whispers began again, soft at first, then rising like a tide. They slithered into my mind, a chorus of chilling voices laced with malice. "Time is an illusion," they murmured, the words swirling like smoke around me. "You are lost. Trapped. Forever." I twisted and turned, hoping to break free from whatever held me, but it was like battling the tide. Every move was met with resistance. Moments or perhaps lifetimes passed, the sensation of time slipping through my fingers. The laughter erupted again, a cacophony of shrieks and giggles echoing in the dark, dancing mockingly around my ear, and then, just as abruptly as it had begun, I felt myself squeeze back into existence, the weight of the world surging back around me. I gasped, pulling in a lungful of frigid air, realization crashing into me like the sound of breaking glass that I was back in my apartment, but it was nothing like before. The walls pulsed with a distorted energy, shifting like living flesh, the lights flickering erratically, casting grotesque shadows across the room. The clock on the wall, once still, now ticked violently, each chime breaking my heart like a hammer against fragile glass. It was seconds away from another hour striking. "Where am I?" I whispered, fear creeping along my spine. My voice wavered, a fragile echo in the distorted space around me. A figure emerged from the gloom, swathed in a veil of darkness but shifting and curling like smoke. The glinting eyes opened wide, fixing on me with an intensity that chilled my bones. You return, it said, the voice honeyed yet dripping with malice. Did you bring the time with you? What do you want from me? I implored, the desperation in my voice betraying my fear. Time is a gift, it hissed, advancing closer, shadows spilling from its form like tar. But it must be given freely. Choose wisely, dear Sarah. Confusion clouded my thoughts. I shook my head, trying to grasp the ebb and flow of reality. I don't understand. I cried, backing against the wall, seeking refuge from the malevolence pressing in. Then let me show you. In an instant, the room shifted again, contorting around me until I stood not in my home but in an alien landscape. It was dusk, the air heavy with dread. An expanse of barren land stretched before me, a graveyard of twisted trees silhouetted against a blood-red sky. Welcome to your memories, the figure said, its voice echoing and reverberating, making the ground tremble beneath me. Each choice, each regret, each fear lives here, waiting for you to claim them. That I stumbled back in horror as memories surged, scenes of my past unraveling around me like ribbons. There were moments of laughter, joy, but they were brutally sandwiched between images of betrayal, loss, and terror. Faces from forgotten corners of my life flickered into view, the people I loved, their expressions twisted in agony, frozen under the weight of despair. Look closely, Sarah, the entity whispered, can you see the truth of your existence? Every tick of the clock, a choice to be made. As I choked back my emotions, the skies darkened further, heavy clouds swirling above me, mocking my despair. Thunder rolled, and just as a torrential downpour of rain began to soak the earth, a chilling realization dawned in me. Clock, the one that had just struck midnight, was ticking louder than ever, counting down to something horrific. I can't face this, I screamed, trying to escape the visions, but they bore down, an avalanche of grief that threatened to swallow me whole. Then you must join the lost. It taunted, extending its dark hand toward the horizon. That I turned, my heart racing, searching for a way out, but creeping tendrils of shadow began to rise from the ground, snaking toward me, wrapping around my ankles, pulling me back into the depths of despair. No! I yelled, fighting against the tide of darkness, but I could feel it tugging at my will, dragging me closer to the inescapable grip of those I had lost. Their faces now masked with terror, reaching out as if pleading for help while bound by the shackles of their own despair. As the countdown echoed with a deafening finality, resounding through the broken earth around me, I was plunged deeper into this waking nightmare just as another pair of glinting eyes opened in the distance, staring with an insatiable hunger, whispering my name with a breathy caress, Sarah, you cannot escape. And then the world shattered around me. The pieces of reality fell away, splattering into a murky haze that permeated the air with dread. I gasped as something clawed at my mind. The whispers grew louder, a chilling symphony clawing for my attention. The shadows writhed, taking on shapes that twisted and contorted, each one a remnant of my past, taunting my every regret. I stumbled forward, every step feeling as if I was dragging chains of despair behind me. The wind howled with the voices of my failures, taunting me with every choice I had ever made, and each one felt like a dark and festering wound reopened. You shouldn't have let them go, they hissed in unison, a chorus of torment that sank into my skin. But there was another sound beneath it all, like a slow, menacing drip of water echoing in the silence of the graveyard. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble, pulsating with an unseen heartbeat, an ever-present reminder of the creeping horror that loomed on the horizon. Behind the shadows, I could see flickering lights, ghostly flashes of a New Year's celebration that once brought me warmth. I strained to make sense of it. Was it the ticker tape of time or a vision from the past? The sounds of laughter and joyous toasts rang out, blending seamlessly with the desolation surrounding me. A blast of cold wind surged forth, and with it came the memories, clearer this time. Each face that materialized carried a weight of sorrow, but one stood out, a young boy with bright eyes, a familiar face. It was my brother, Thomas. I hadn't seen him since that fateful day, the day he had vanished without a trace, leaving an unhealed scar in my heart. No, not you. I screamed, knowing he wouldn't remember me beyond that last moment of laughter. I rushed to him, but he floated away, merging with the shadows, surrounded by the cacophony of lost souls. Sarah, a whisper penetrated my thoughts, drawing my eye to the edge of the graveyard where the trees loomed. The wind shifted, revealing a figure dressed in a tattered black coat, one that danced in and out of view like it was part of the very fabric of this nightmare. "Help me," it rasped, its voice breaking the stillness of the graveyard as if it had been trapped there for centuries, begging for release. "You must choose, choose." I echoed, half in disbelief, half in desperation. "Choose what? Time is a gift," it croaked, stepping into the light. The figure was skeletal, a moving testament to lost years, bones grinding against each other with every movement, yet its eyes were bright with a hunger I recognized, the hunger for redemption, for a chance to rewrite fate. "But it comes at a price." The shadows shifted behind the figure, and I could see them starting to form shapes that looked all too familiar, the faces of my loved ones, their mouths twisted in silent screams, each one pleading for release from the grasp of time itself. As I looked around, the landscape began to pulse in sync with the eerie beat, as if the world was waiting, holding its breath for my decision. Would I trade their memories for my own freedom? Would I risk losing the last pieces of my heart? The clock in my mind ticked mercilessly, louder and louder, as if every tick was a heartbeat of the darkness closing in on me. Just as I made a step forward, I felt tendrils wrap tighter around my ankles, snakes of despair threatening to drag me back into the void. And then, bursting from the ground, another figure erupted, a woman covered in dirt, her mouth contorted in horror. It took me a painful moment to recognize her. The last image burned into my mind from that day at the lake. My mother. "Sarah. Please." She wailed, her voice filled with unimaginable pain. "Don't leave me here." I was frozen between my brother and mother, two souls reaching for me, trapped in the darkness of their own fates. Tears streamed down my face as fear consumed the hope. The boundary between this world and the next wobbled like a flame on the brink of extinction. The tattered figure grinned, sharp teeth glinting in the gloom. "Now, Sarah. Choose. Sacrifice your past to save your future, or bring them into the darkness with you." In that moment, the clock struck once, its chime filling the air, halting my breath. A deafening roar erupted around me, drowning my thoughts in a cacophony of fright. The shadows grew restless, hungry. "Choose now." The figure screamed, time itself fractured, and my next decision would determine the fate of my very soul. The ground began to crumble around me, a sinkhole of my fears opening up like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. And just before it did, I heard the words that would haunt my every decision from this point forward, whispering with an icy breath, "You have only seconds left." Everything fell into chaos, and then darkness. When the darkness receded, I found myself in a place that felt eerily familiar yet disturbingly twisted. It was my childhood home, but everything was wrong. The walls bled shadows that slithered onto the floor, thick with an oppressive humidity that clung to my skin. The air itself seemed heavier, suffocating with a sense of impending doom. Hesitantly, I moved through the dimly lit hallway, the wallpaper peeling away like the memories I longed to forget. Each step echoed with an unsettling resonance, the sound swallowed by the weight of dread that hung in the air. Strange whispers swirled around me, words I couldn't quite grasp, rising and falling like the tide of my anxiety. In the living room, the New Year's Eve decorations still clung to the corners, festooned in a morbid celebration of life without love. A cracked mirror hung above the mantel, its surface tarnished and warped. I caught a flicker of movement in its depths, and when I approached, my heart raced as a hollow reflection gazed back at me, an older version of myself, eyes sunken in grief, a hollow laugh decorating her lips as if daring me to confront my reality. "Sarah," the vision murmured in a voice laden with regret. "You cannot escape what you are about to face." Suddenly, the clock on the wall began to tick, reverberating louder and louder until it drowned out the whispers. Tick. Tock. I stumbled backward, clutching my head as recognition streamed like ice through my veins. It was the countdown to midnight. Each chime resonated like a death knell, growing closer to sealing my fate. Fear rippled through me, and I whirled around, desperate to escape the specters of my past. The hallway twisted and warped, elongating like fingers clawing for my retreating form. I was overwhelmed by an urge to flee, to run to the door at the end of the corridor. Simple and unassuming, yet I felt an invisible weight keeping me tethered to the moonlit nightmare. Thud. Thud. The sound reverberated from behind me, a heavy, deliberate knock echoing against the rigid silence. My breath caught in my throat as I slowly turned. Each breath felt like sandpaper against my lungs, rough and hesitant. The front door creaked on its hinge, an invitation or a warning. I dared not approach, afraid of what lay beyond the threshold. "Sarah, let me in," came a voice, sweet and loving yet tinged with an edge of madness I had never heard from my mother before. It flayed against my senses, a knife scraping against bone, beckoning me. "Please, Sarah," the voice grew urgent, frantic. "It's cold out here. Let me in." Struggling against the instinct to obey, I took a step backwards. Out of the corner of my eye, the floorboards shifted as if alive, writhing like snakes. Shadows crawled up the walls, and I could feel the room contract like an empty lung struggling to breathe. "Open the door." My mother's voice became jagged and harsh, a cacophony of sorrow and desperation that twisted in my gut. The pounding intensified, and the door trembled under the fury of her insistence. Suddenly, another voice entered the fray. This one was deeper, darker. "Me brothers. Let us in, Sarah. We can be a family again. Together." "No!" I screamed, covering my ears as tears cascaded down my cheeks, each drop a plea for sanity amidst the ensnaring nightmares. "You're not real. This can't be happening." The laughter from the shadows swelled, mocking my anguish. I was trapped in a tempest of emotions, the weight of my choices pressing down on my shoulders as the specters of my family screamed for my attention. The clock chimed, one deafening peal echoing through my consciousness. Panic gripped my heart, the countdown tightening the noose around my sanity. These weren't simply ghosts, they were reflections of what I had lost, manifestations of my grief, and now I was being forced to choose between the fading echoes of a family that had long since been buried or surrendering to a darkness that promised nothing but despair. With renewed determination, I turned back toward the mirror, hoping to find some answer in the distorted glass. But what I saw there made my breath stall in my throat. The reflection of the older Sarah was no longer laughing, she was crying, her face morphing into something grotesque and unrecognizable, skin stretched thin over fragile bones, a mouth now contorted into a silent scream as she clawed at the sides of the glass, trying to escape. At that moment, the wall behind me exploded with a hush of cold air, and a figure saturated in shadow stepped forward, larger, darker, and somehow more alluring than the last. Its voice was smooth like silk, promising everything I craved in an instant. "What will you sacrifice, Sarah? Your sanity, your memories, or?" The ground started to quake beneath me, shaking with the fervor of the soul's longing for release. The figure began to elongate, and shadows spilled forth from its form, crashing against my defenses. "Choose, Sarah. You have only moments left. The clock strikes midnight." Then my heart thundered as I felt myself being pulled in every direction, possible choices weighing heavy on my mind. I could feel their reach, desperate and pleading, as reality began to fray at the edges. And in that final heartbeat, beneath the crushing weight of time's relentless march, I had no idea what nightmare would emerge as it struck 12. The sound of the clock's chime reverberated through the house, a gong signaling the final countdown to a fate I couldn't fully comprehend. With each echo, the shadows pulsed and writhed, the air thickening with malice as if the walls themselves held their breath in anticipation of an inevitable climax. "Choose." The shadow demanded, its voice a haunting melody that wrapped around my consciousness. The air around me grew colder, and I could see my breath escaping in sharp puffs, vapor spiraling into the thickening dark. In that moment, the memories collided like a cacophonous storm within me. During family dinners that faded into screams, joy turned to sorrow, and love twisted into bitterness. Fragments of the past tangled in my mind like fingers in a knot, every ghost a different shade of regret. The figure stood before me, silent yet screaming with possibility, a promise and a threat intertwined. "Your family longs for you, Sarah. The shadows will protect you," it whispered, its tone soothing, slippery, like honey drizzling through the cracks of my thoughts. Just let go of the pain. With a strangled cry, I stepped backward into the mirror's realm, expecting to thrash against its glassy surface. Instead, I fell into an expanse of swirling shadows that gathered and parted like heavy curtains, revealing scenes of my family I had buried deep within. The warmth of nostalgia flooded over me, pulling me further into the memories as the echo of their laughter washed over my frayed soul. That I watched as my younger self played in the garden, the sun shining bright above, my mother smiling with joy as she knelt to tie my shoelaces. A pang of bitterness rose within me. It was a moment untouched by the shadows that had since engulfed our lives. I longed to return to that innocence, to erase the loss that lay ahead, but just as quickly as the warmth gripped me, the allure twisted malignant, morphing into my father's angry visage, flames flickering behind his eyes. "You fled, Sarah. You left us," he screamed, his voice reverberating with rage and despair. The garden wilted before my eyes, flowers wilting and shadows encroaching, swallowing the daylight. That I gasped and collided with something cold at my back and turned to find myself face to face with the spectre. Its depths pulsed, dark tendrils reaching towards me like claws eager to clutch my heart. "Join them, Sarah. Embrace the darkness, they are nothing without you." The walls shook violently, splintering and crashing as the spectral voices crescendoed, creating a discordant symphony that tugged at my sanity. The relentless ticking of the clock merged with their screeches, drowning my thoughts, filling me with dread. That I turned to flee but found the shadow blocked my way. It surged towards me, pressing against my chest, cool and suffocating. "The moment has come, Sarah. Choose your sacrifice." The remorseful faces of my family swirled in a tempest of shadow and light behind the figure, their eyes hollow, mouths kept ajar in unspoken pleas. The once shimmering memories now transformed into a twisted panorama of anguish. I was out of time, the clock chiming again, each sound a reminder of my impending doom. "Choose." The shadow surged closer, merging into the very essence of my being, its whispers curling around my mind, coaxing out my pain, my fears, and my desires. "Let go of the past," it urged, "and we will be whole again." The clock's chimes rang out crisp and clear, each strike eviscerating my willpower. The weight of the world pressed down harder, my heart thrummed against my ribs in frantic protest. "You can have them back. Just surrender completely." That I clenched my fists, grappling with the decision that thrashed inside me like a wild beast. Could I truly relinquish what was left of my reality? My family, even these fractured memories, were they worth sacrificing for an escape? With one final chime, the shadows expanded, obscuring everything until I could only see the faint flicker of hope reflected in my mother's eyes as her voice echoed deep in my soul. "Do not let them keep you." The moment of clarity was punctuated by a sudden crash from behind, a sound of shattering glass that startled me back to the present. I spun around just in time to see the gleaming shards of the mirror explode outward, ripping through the air like shattered dreams. From the remnants of that reflective surface, a new figure emerged, a monstrous amalgamation of my parents' features warped into a grotesque mask of love and resentment. Heart racing, I felt reality ripple beneath my feet. My family, their faces twisted in agony, were clawing their way out from the very edges of the darkness that loomed over me. "Help us, Sarah!" they wailed, stretching out their hands, now grotesque parodies of what they once were. With a deafening crack, the clock struck midnight. Silence enveloped me as the last chime echoed, and the shadows surged with an insatiable hunger. My heart froze as the twisted faces reached for me, a cacophony of screams clamoring for my choice, demanding my soul in exchange for their release. The darkness thickened further, sucking the warmth from my skin, and as I succumbed to their cries, a voice broke through the turmoil, haunting and familiar, yet utterly chilling. "Sarah, you should have opened the door." And then the world shattered. In the depths of the void where reality collapsed, I felt tendrils of darkness weave through the remnants of my consciousness, ensnaring me in a wicked embrace. The air turned electric with malevolence, tingling against my skin, and I gasped as the echo of the destroyed mirror's glass swept like shards of ice across my body. Visions of my fragmented family twisted and writhed in the shadows, their pleas melding into a horrific chorus that clamored for my choice. The monster with my parents' features advanced, a grotesque marionette of love turned to despair. I could no longer see individual expressions, only a monstrous visage contorted in rage and sorrow. "You are the key, Sarah. Don't let them drown," it cried, its voice a cacophony that echoed at the back of my mind. Terror gripped me, making it difficult to breathe. The shadows coiled tighter, squeezing the hope from my chest, and I fought to retreat, but my legs felt rooted to the ground as if the very darkness whispered restraints around my ankles. "Join us," they cooed, a chilling seduction seeping into my soul. "All we want is your submission. We need you to break the chains." Compelled by the chaos, I recoiled from the writhing amalgamation. "No. You were once my family. You're not." They can't. My words faltered as I watched, paralyzed, as they morphed into a swirling cyclone of despair and anguish. Faces I had cherished twisted into expressions that mirrored the very nightmares I had buried within. Suddenly, a luminous blast tore through the shadows, illuminating a pathway behind my parents. It was a doorway, an ethereal portal that flickered and whispered my name, promising answers. Darkness surged in response, fractures forming in the malevolent landscape as I was caught in the crossfire of light and shadow. "Sarah, don't go!" cried a voice, unmistakably my mother's, as her eyes pleaded with me to stay, but it was now a tempest of agony and sorrow. The swirling shadows released a cacophony of anguished screams, shaking the very fabric of reality around me. I didn't know what lay beyond that threshold, but it whispered like a siren enticing me to cross. "Sarah, leave this wretched place." The pained expressions of my family shattered into fury in response despite their calls, and the darkness lunged toward the shimmering portal. "No!" it thundered, liquid shadows lashing out like serpents, seeking to restrain me with bitter intent. In that moment of choice, when the world twisted on the cusp of illumination, I felt the walls thrum with the pulse of hearts long gone, echoing through the tendrils that gripped my wrists tighter than any vice. My vision blurred, reality shivering like ice with every heartbeat that synchronized to the menacing rhythm. I tore my gaze from my family, their cries echoing in my mind. Ignoring the storm of sorrow filling my chest, I shut my eyes to their fate and hurled myself into the glowing portal. It was a leap of faith into the unknown, a desperate grasp at salvation and clarity. The brightness enveloped me, and I was weightless, plunged into a dizzying stream of light. But the sanctuary was fleeting, it ebbed away, leaving me suspended in the abyss. All at once, the light flickered, the shadows swirling around it, an inky void licking hungrily at my sides. With a jarring lurch, I was ripped back into darkness. Reality slammed back into place, and I stumbled forward into an unfamiliar space, a room thick with stale air and the smell of mildew. Confused, I blinked against the dim light filtering in from cracked windows. Was this my escape? Terror crept back in. The room was adorned with old relics, family portraits covered in dust, their frames cracked like the lives trapped inside. As I approached, the figures seemed alive in the flickering light, their eyes watching guardians or the guilty. I couldn't tell. "Sarah, you can't hide from them," a voice rasped, chilling me to the core. It was familiar yet foreign. Turning slowly, I confronted the silhouette lurking in the shadows. Heart pounding, I recognized the reflection of someone I thought I'd left behind, my face twisted in a haunting imitation of despair. "Bring them back, Sarah," the doppelganger taunted, its voice a sickening blend of compassion and malice. "You think you can escape the darkness? You never truly understood what they wanted." And with that revelation, the air grew frozen. I felt the world closing in, suffocating me, as darkness seeped from the walls, and my own reflection reached for me, fingers stretching beyond the surface like grotesque tendrils ready to pull me back into the layer of shadows. "Choose again, Sarah, before the clock strikes 12 once more." As the echoes of a clock began to chime, I realized it was not merely time that was running out. The final toll of the clock reverberated through the room, each strike sending tremors coursing through my body. My doppelganger grinned, a rictus of wicked glee that sliced through the stifling air. "Midnight approaches, Sarah. The moment of truth is near. Will you choose to face it, or will you surrender to the shadows once more?" Each tick of the clock pressed like a vice on my chest, forcing me to confront the reality of my predicament. I staggered back, heart racing as the relentless whispers and screams returned to fill the silence, a haunting symphony of both hope and desperation. The family portraits seemed to shift subtly, their expressions morphing into images of torment, each painted face silently begging for salvation, for someone to make a choice. Driven by sheer instinct, I tore my gaze from the malevolent figure of myself and scanned the room frantically. Clusters of broken clocks lined the walls, all ticking in unison, their hands racing toward midnight. I couldn't shake the sensation of being watched. Shadows dipped and swayed like wraiths, following my movements with predatory intent. Steeling myself, I turned my attention back to the ominous doppelganger. Why do you torment me? Why do you resemble me? I gasped, my voice trembling as I fought to stay grounded in this place of horrors. The creature laughed softly, its mirth chilling like a gentle breeze on a winter's night. You cannot escape what you are. Every shadow you've cast, every truth unacknowledged, has shaped your essence. You are the consequence of your choices, Sarah. Embrace it. The shadows thickened, swirling around my ankles, whispering secrets of my past, regrets I had buried deep down. My mind flashed to faces I had lost, moments I had squandered. They flooded over me with the weight of guilt, clashing against the love I still clung to. With each beat of the clock, the tension in the room thickened, saturating with dread and the inevitability of darkness. No. I shouted defiantly, drawing on remnants of the strength I thought lost. I am not my regrets. I refuse to become a vessel for your malice. The laughter died abruptly, leaving an oppressive silence hanging in the air like a thick fog. The floorboards creaked with unseen weight as the shadows suddenly recoiled, shifting away from me, almost hesitant. For a fleeting moment, hope sparked within me, a feeling of power and resistance igniting my chest, but the reprieve was short-lived. The clock struck 11:30, sending a shiver down my spine. Suddenly, the air shimmered with an electrifying charge, and the shadows twisted, pulling at the edges of my sanity. You do not understand your power, the spectre hissed, its dagger-like fingers curling into claws. Or the price you'll pay for denying your true self. Then, all at once, the shadows lunged. In a panic, I dashed toward the door I could barely see through the inky darkness that threatened to entangle me. As I sprinted, I felt cold tendrils caress my skin, whispering abandonment and despair. The shadows were alive, aware, their voices multiplying until I could no longer discern the words, just the overwhelming sense of dread they emanated. That I slammed against the door, ramming it with all my might, and to my utter astonishment, it swung open. The darkness peeled back, revealing a flickering corridor lined with candles that cast an eerie glow. I stumbled into the space beyond, desperate for an escape. The air was thick with the scent of decay, but the crackling lights urged me forward. Suddenly, I heard the clock chime again, louder this time. 11:75. With each tick, the urgency accelerated within me, urging me to flee. That I sprinted down the corridor, but shadows snaked around my legs, pulling me back, sharp claws grazing my ankles, dragging me further into darkness. I could sense my doppelganger looming behind me, hungry, ready to reclaim the identity I fought so hard to escape. Face it, Sarah. Time is running out. The spectre bellowed, its tone transforming from playful taunting to furious wrath. You think you can outrun destiny? Finally, I reached the end of the corridor, where a massive door glimmered with an unfathomable power, glowing as if it could offer me salvation. Without a second thought, I launched myself at it, throwing both hands against the surface. As the door creaked open, a blinding light flooded the space, illuminating shadows that howled and shrieked in fury. But as I stepped through, time shattered like glass, the world split open, and I found myself falling into an expanse of light and darkness intertwined. I screamed, grasping for something, anything, to anchor me in a reality that was rapidly unraveling. No. Echoed the cacophony of voices, and in that instant, the darkness surged, enveloping me in an icy grip. The final chime of midnight rang soft yet thunderous in my ears, reverberating through the endless void, as I plummeted deeper into silent shadows. I had escaped one captivity, only to find myself ensnared in something darker, something that had only just begun to awaken. Silence hung heavily, and then I heard them, whispers arising from the dark, familiar voices calling my name, pleading. Join us, Sarah, forever. In that moment of vulnerability, I felt hands pulling at me from all sides, dragging me further into their haunting embrace. And behind me, the door I thought I had opened slammed shut with a finality that echoed like a death knell. The twist of reality was disorienting as I descended into the abyss. The hands that reached for me were both tender and destructive, like a lover's caress shadowed by malice. The memories they stirred were akin to ice splintering through my very essence. Faces distorted in pain and yearning flashed in my mind, my mother's fading smile, the distant echo of laughter from childhood friends all wrapped in a shimmering veil of sorrow. Sudden coldness gripped me tighter, and my body jerked in response, sending jolts of adrenaline flooding through my veins. I twisted my head, searching for a way out, for any semblance of hope. The whispering voices turned sinister, now conjoined into a grotesque symphony. "We are your reflection, your past choices, let us show you freedom." I cried out, the word clawing its way from my throat. But as the darkness embraced me, the familiar weight of despair began to settle like thick fog. I felt the shadows part, revealing fleeting glimpses of a twisted carnival, a nightmarish celebration with morbidly dancing figures under a blood-red moon. "Your time is now," the voices chorused, their tones unifying in a haunting harmony. "Join the revelry, accept your place among us." That I could feel the room swirling around me, and the air thickened with the scent of burnt sugar and rot. A colossal clock tower loomed at the center of this hellish carnival, its hands ticking backwards, each beat eliciting an electric jolt of fear. Something snapped within me, igniting a primal urge to fight. I clenched my fists and willed myself to stand. "Enough!" I screamed, my voice echoing like thunder amid the howling winds. "I am not a pawn in your game." Suddenly, a phosphorescent apparition spun into view, a hazy figure that looked like me yet empty of all my own vitality. Its eyes burned with fury as it shrieked, "You cannot refuse us. The clock only ticks for you." As if on cue, the clock's pendulum swung faster, its hum vibrating through my bones as the revelry reached a fever pitch. The air vibrated, becoming weighted with a confluence of emotions: fear, hatred, love, and despair twisted together in a fog of confusion that threatened to swallow me whole. In one breath, the collective energy of the carnival figures surged toward me, intertwining with my very essence, each tug drawing me closer to the core of their madness. Terrified, I darted away from the writhing masses and dashed toward the clock, desperate to disrupt its unyielding march backward. Just as I reached out for the pendulum, a piercing scream echoed behind me, wrenching my focus. I turned to see the shadowed figure of my doppelganger writhing in torment, its form flickering like a broken film reel. "You've made your choice, Sarah. The shadows will take what is theirs, and you will pay the price of your stubbornness." The carnival distorted as my doppelganger grasped for the air, each pulse of its struggle causing the shadows to writhe and twitch around me, merging into a chaotic tempest. The laughter, once joyous, transformed into wailing cries of anguish, a macabre celebration of all my failures. The clock tower throbbed, its hands catching the light of the blood moon as it ticked ever louder, a countdown that seemed to echo within me. I seized the pendulum, its cold metal biting against my palm, and for one fleeting moment, clarity reigned. If I am to confront my truth, then let me confront it head-on. I roared, swinging the pendulum with every ounce of strength I had left, but the sharp clang of metal met flesh as unseen claws tore at my sides, an agonizing reminder that the darkness sought to stake its claim on my very soul. The grasping shadows pulled at me once more, relentless in their hunger, and as I choked out a scream, a blinding light erupted from where I held the pendulum, illuminating the tortured revelers for an agonizing instant. Faces twisted in grotesque horror surrounded me, their screams merging into a cacophony of despair and rage. The clock struck 1, the sounds reverberating like a death knell, slicing through the fabric of reality. In that moment of vulnerability, a shadow shot forward, coiling around my throat, filling my lungs with despair. I could barely breathe as the figures closed in, shrieking in a bloodthirsty harmony. My heart raced as a flood of impending doom consumed me, and then, through the suffocating darkness, a voice broke free, soft, haunting, yet familiar. "Sarah, trust me." With a gasp, I realized I recognized it. But before I could react, the shadows saturated my senses, blurring the line between light and dark as I was pulled deeper into oblivion. Then the clock's final clang signaled a harrowing truth: midnight had come and gone with a vengeance, leaving me to navigate a labyrinth of horrors with only the whispers of the lost to guide me. The haze of shadows burst apart like a dam as I landed with a jarring thud on the ground, gasping, desperate for air. It took a moment to adjust to the light piercing through the dark, but when I finally looked up, I realized I was back in my apartment. Yet, everything felt off. The once familiar walls now shimmered, alive and breathing, the air quaking with the heavy undertone of something primal and horrific. My hands trembled as I fumbled my phone, but the screen remained shattered, unyielding to my desperate taps. I stumbled to my feet, turning around, trying to trick my mind into believing this was a safe haven. But then, I heard the first echo of laughter, soft and sinister, circling me like a predator sizing up its prey. "You come back, Sarah." "Always back, who's there?" My voice sounded fragile, splintered, but I pressed on. I had escaped the carnival, the nightmarish clock tower, consuming layers of regret and despair, and I would not be trapped again. "Did you think you could escape us?" The voice was a whisper that felt like ice running down my spine, weaving through my thoughts and memories. "We are part of you." Suddenly, the walls shimmered again, and shadowy silhouettes emerged, writhing in the periphery of my vision. Figures that bore faces I knew all too well. Mom. Thomas. I hesitated, the names tumbling from my lips like falling leaves, heavy with remorse. They didn't answer but merely watched with hollow eyes filled with an almost eager hunger. "You cannot run from what you've done, Sarah." The shadows coiled around me, tightening like a noose. "You've donned the mask of bravery to flee, but courage can only get you so far." The reality around me twisted, the soft glow of the moon suffocated under the weight of darkness, warping the world I knew. I reached for the door, intent on breaking free, but the shadows danced, mimicking my past mistakes, my failures, each flicker a taunt meant to anchor me in place. "Leave if you dare," they hissed, "but remember you belong to us." The air gargled as if the apartment itself lamented the anguish I was too terrified to confront. Then, as if time had spun backward, the clock chimed its familiar echo, marking the midnight hour. "No, please!" I cried, panic igniting the chaos around me. "I won't go back." But before I could run, the shadows coalesced, swallowing the room with suffocating despair. I lunged for the door again, but it slammed shut, echoing through the soupy darkness. "You will face your demons, Sarah. You wanted to run away from this, now they'll come for you." Tendrils of shadow snared my limbs, pulling me into their icy embrace, colder than ice, yet razor-sharp. In horror, I recognized the faces materializing in the darkness. The depths of my guilt made flesh and blood. I could see my brother, his once bright eyes now void, shimmering with malice. "You left me. You forgot me." "Thomas, no." My heart pounded against my ribs, desperately pleading for him to understand. I tried. I thought, but the words fell away, scattered ashes on the wind, while the darkness thickened around me. "Will you choose to reclaim your memories, or let them consume you?" The shadowy figure of my doppelganger sneered, drawing closer to unveiling the truth I had run from countless times. "Make your choice, Sarah. Until then, you're ours." With each agonizing second passing, I felt the grip of despair tightening, squeezing the very essence of my being. My heartbeat pounded against my eardrums, drowning out the sinister whispers. I had battled against my past and evaded its grasp, yet here it was, resurrecting the trauma I thought I had banished. "Please let me go," I begged, catching sight of a glimmer of light behind the darkness, a flicker of hope that promised escape. But the shadows raged against it, their anger crackling through the air with palpable energy. "You must choose one thing: to sacrifice your sanity, your freedom, or what remains of your family." That I grasped my head, nails digging into my scalp as terror wrapped around my thoughts. The clock ticked louder with each second, ticking down the very wishes I had hoped for, demanding. I invoke my final choice. Reality blurred, the very essence of my life hanging in the balance, swirling with memories twisted together. That I can't decide. I shrieked as thick darkness enveloped me, threatening to swallow what little light remained in my heart. And then I saw its clock face bearing down on me, not as a herald of doom but as a reminder of every moment I had neglected, reflecting every choice wielded against me like a weapon. In that instant of clarity, I recognized the truth. My family, trapped in the shadows, were not my captors, they were pieces of myself I had chosen to forsake. "Okay," I whispered, surrendering my desperation, tears stinging my eyes. I choose to remember. The words tumbled out with a newfound strength. I could feel power coursing through me, pushing back against the shadows clawing for my mind that and the instant I relinquished my fear, the walls shuddered, echoes of anguished wails filling the air. The clock ceased its merciless ticking, each face of my family emerging from the darkness, their eyes illuminating the room. Together they coalesced into a radiant being, the embodiment of love and resistance. "You are not lost," the figure declared, a whisper of the warmth I once knew. "Choose us, and we shall transcend this darkness." And suddenly it struck me, a horrifying revelation blooming in the depths of my soul: I was never their savior. I was their tether to salvation, the missing piece needed to unleash their desires back into the light. The shadows swirled violently around me, clawing and shrieking in denial of my realization, but I wouldn't yield. With each heartbeat, I pulled my family close, embracing the warmth of love against the cold touch of despair. This was my choice. But just as light pierced through the darkest corners, an unbearable weight pressed upon my chest. The shadows laughed, knowing I had unlocked an ancient bond that went far beyond the mental. The dark twisted closer, the cost of my awakening clawed at my consciousness with screams stitched together by broken promises, and in that horrible instant, with the last pieces of my family tethered to my very essence, I felt the room rip apart. An anguished scream echoed out just as the room imploded, and I was pulled backward through time's gaping maw. Echoes of laughter merged into a tumultuous roar, and then darkness claimed my mind, emptying me of my memories anew. But this time, something remained, a glint of their eyes surrounding me, feeding off my soul as time lapsed through the fabric of existence, forever reaching for freedom as a wicked laugh faded in the distance. "I'll be back," their whispers echoed in my mind, making me wonder if I would ever truly escape the darkness, for the shadows dined on despair even through the most joyous moments. And then I realized, in my escape from one nightmare, I had merely stepped into another. The entity had not been vanquished, it had simply adapted, enhanced my fears, and forged a deeper connection to the darkness that remained amiss. And as the haunting laughter wrapped around me, time lost its meaning entirely.